The boy could barely hold a baseball bat. His hands shook every time he tried to swing. Babe Ruth's son was afraid of the game that made his father famous. When Joe DiMaggio watched Babe Ruth's son fail again and again, tears running down the boy's face, he made a promise that would change everything. Because Babe Ruth was dying, and his biggest worry wasn't about baseball records. It was about his son who hated everything baseball represented. It was a cold Tuesday morning in March 1947 when Joe DiMaggio first saw the boy. DiMaggio was early for spring training, walking through the empty corridors of Yankee Stadium when he heard the unmistakable sound of a baseball hitting wood, but something was wrong with the sound. It was weak, uncertain, followed immediately by the clatter of a dropped bat. DiMaggio followed the noise to the old practice field behind the stadium. There, standing alone in the morning mist, was a 16-year-old boy swinging at imaginary pitches. The boy was tall and lanky, with the same broad shoulders that had made his father famous. But where Babe Ruth had commanded the batter's box with confidence, this boy looked like he was fighting for his life. The boy's name was William Ruth, Jr., but everyone called him Billy. He was Babe Ruth's son, though he spent most of his time trying to forget that fact. DiMaggio watched from the shadows as Billy swung at air, his form terrible, his timing worse. The boy was trying so hard that sweat poured down his face despite the cold morning air. Every few swings he would stop and wipe his eyes, frustrated tears mixing with the perspiration. This wasn't practice. This was punishment. DiMaggio had heard the stories about Billy Ruth, how the kid had been kicked off his high school baseball team for fighting with the coach, how he'd been thrown out of 3 different baseball camps for refusing to follow instructions, how he told anyone who would listen that he hated baseball and everything it represented. But watching Billy now, DiMaggio realized the truth was more complicated. The boy didn't hate baseball. He was terrified of it. DiMaggio stepped out of the shadows. "Your stance is all wrong," he said quietly. Billy spun around, startled. When he saw Joe DiMaggio standing there, his face turned red with embarrassment. "I'm not supposed to be here," Billy said, dropping the bat. "I was just leaving." "Why?" DiMaggio asked. "It's a free field. You've got as much right to practice as anyone." Billy looked at the ground. "Because I'm no good. Because I'm a disappointment to the Ruth name. Because everyone expects me to be my father, and I'll never be half the player he was." DiMaggio studied the boy's face. He saw pain there, and anger, and a deep well of sadness that no 16-year-old should carry. "Who told you that you had to be your father?" DiMaggio asked. Billy laughed bitterly. "Everyone. Every coach, every scout, every reporter who ever looked at me. They see the name Ruth, and they expect magic. They expect home runs and records and greatness. All I can give them is failure." DiMaggio picked up the bat Billy had dropped. It was too heavy for the boy, too long, completely wrong for his build. "This isn't your bat," DiMaggio said. "It's my dad's old bat," Billy said. "Everyone says I should use it, for inspiration." "Your dad was 6'2" and weighed 240 pounds, DiMaggio said. "You're what, 6 feet and maybe 160? Using his bat is like trying to drive his car before you've learned to ride a bicycle." Billy had never thought of it that way. DiMaggio handed the bat back to Billy. "Show me your swing again." "It's terrible," Billy said. "You'll just laugh." "I won't laugh," DiMaggio promised. Billy took his awkward stance and swung at the air. His form was indeed terrible. His feet were positioned wrong, his grip was too tight, his timing was completely off. But DiMaggio saw something else. Underneath all the fear and tension, there was natural ability. The boy had good hand-eye coordination, decent power, and a quick wrist snap that could be developed. "You've got potential," DiMaggio said. Billy stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But you're trying to play someone else's game. You need to find your own." That was the beginning of the most important relationship in Billy Ruth's life. What DiMaggio didn't tell Billy that first morning was that he had made a promise to the boy's father. 3 weeks earlier, DiMaggio had visited Babe Ruth in the hospital. The babe was dying of throat cancer, his once powerful voice reduced to a whisper. Joe the babe had said, gripping DiMaggio's hand with surprising strength, "I need to ask you something." DiMaggio had leaned in close to hear the dying legend's words. "My boy Billy," the babe whispered. "He's lost. I tried to help him with baseball, But I made it worse. I pushed too hard, expected too much. Now he won't even look at a bat without crying." DiMaggio had seen the pain in his teammates' eyes. Babe Ruth, the man who had hit 714 home runs and changed the game of baseball forever, was dying with the knowledge that he had failed the person who mattered most. "He's got talent, Joe. Real talent. But he's so scared of disappointing people that he can't even try anymore. Will you help him? Will you teach him that baseball can be fun again?" DiMaggio had gripped the babe's hand. "I promise." Now, standing on that practice field with Billy, DiMaggio was ready to keep that promise, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. The boy was carrying years of pressure, disappointment, and pain. It would take time to undo that damage. "Meet me here tomorrow morning," DiMaggio told Billy. 6 a.m. sharp. "Why?" Billy asked suspiciously. "Because I'm going to teach you how to play baseball. Not your father's version of baseball. Your version." Billy shook his head. "I don't want to learn. I'm done with baseball." "No, you're not," DiMaggio said gently. "You're here, aren't you? You're swinging a bat even though no one is watching. That means you still love the game. You're just afraid of it." Billy was quiet for a long moment. "What if I'm really no good? What if everyone's right about me?" DiMaggio looked the boy in the eyes. "Then we'll find out together. But you'll never know if you keep running away." The next morning, Billy was there at 6 a.m. sharp, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. DiMaggio started with the basics. He got Billy a bat that was the right size and weight for his frame. He taught him how to stand, how to hold his hands, how to keep his eye on the ball. Most importantly, he taught him to relax. Baseball is supposed to be fun. DiMaggio reminded Billy again and again. The moment it stops being fun, you're doing it wrong. It took weeks for Billy to stop flinching every time he swung the bat. He had been so conditioned to expect failure that success seemed impossible. But DiMaggio was patient. He never raised his voice, never showed frustration, never compared Billy to his father. Instead, he focused on small improvements. A better stance here, a smoother swing there. He celebrated every tiny victory and ignored every mistake. Slowly, Billy began to improve. His confidence grew with his ability. The fear began to fade, replaced by something Billy had never felt before when holding a baseball bat: joy. But the real test came when other players started showing up for spring training. Billy was practicing with DiMaggio one morning when several Yankees players arrived early. They recognized Billy immediately. Everyone in baseball knew Babe Ruth's son. They watched him take a few practice swings, and DiMaggio could see the expectation in their eyes. Billy saw it too. His hands started shaking again. His stance became tense. He swung and missed 3 imaginary pitches in a row. "I can't do this," Billy whispered to DiMaggio. "Not with them watching." "Yes, you can," DiMaggio said firmly. "But first I want you to remember something. These men aren't here to judge you. They're here because they love baseball just like you do. They want to see good baseball, not perfect baseball." DiMaggio called out to the other players. "Hey fellows, Billy here has been working on his swing. Want to see how he's coming along?" Billy's face went white with terror, but before he could protest, DiMaggio was setting up to pitch to him. "Just remember what we've practiced," DiMaggio said quietly. "Relax, have fun, show them your swing, not your father's." The first pitch came in straight and true. Billy swung and made solid contact, sending the ball flying toward the outfield fence. It wasn't a home run, but it was a good, clean hit. The watching players applauded. "Nice swing, kid," one of them called out. Billy looked stunned. He had expected criticism, comparison to his father, disappointment. Instead, he got encouragement. DiMaggio threw another pitch. This time Billy was ready. He connected even better, driving the ball to the gap in left center field. "Damn, Billy!" another player shouted. "You've been holding out on us." For the first time in years, Billy Ruth smiled while holding a baseball bat. Over the next few weeks, Billy's transformation was remarkable. He went from a scared, tense boy to a confident young player. He wasn't his father. He would never be his father. But he was becoming himself, and that was enough. The other Yankees players took notice. They started including Billy in their informal practice sessions. They gave him tips and encouragement. Most importantly, they treated him like a ball player, not like Babe Ruth's son. But the biggest change was in Billy's relationship with his father. Babe Ruth's condition was deteriorating rapidly. He was confined to his hospital bed, too weak to visit the stadium. Billy had been avoiding the hospital for months, unable to face his father's disappointment in him. DiMaggio decided it was time to change that. "Your father needs to see you play," DiMaggio told Billy one afternoon after practice. "He's too sick," Billy said. "The doctors say he shouldn't have visitors." "I didn't say visit," DiMaggio said with a slight smile. "I said he needs to see you play." The next day, DiMaggio arranged for a movie camera to be set up at the practice field. He filmed Billy taking batting practice, fielding ground balls, and throwing to first base. It wasn't professional quality, but it captured Billy's newfound confidence and skill. That evening, DiMaggio took the film to the hospital. Babe Ruth was barely conscious when DiMaggio arrived, but he perked up when he saw his old teammate. "Joe," the Babe whispered. "How's my boy doing?" Instead of answering, DiMaggio set up a small projector and began showing the film. On the makeshift screen, Billy Ruth stepped into the batter's box with confidence. His stance was perfect, his swing smooth and natural. He connected with pitch after pitch, sending balls flying all over the practice field. Tears began streaming down Babe Ruth's face. "That's my boy," he whispered. "That's my Billy." But the Babe saw more than just good baseball on that screen. He saw his son smiling. He saw him laughing with the other players. He saw him enjoying the game that had brought so much pain to their family. "You did it, Joe," the Babe said, gripping DiMaggio's hand. "You gave him back his love for the game." DiMaggio shook his head. "I didn't do anything. Billy had it in him all along. He just needed someone to help him find it." 3 days later, Babe Ruth passed away peacefully in his sleep. His last words were about Billy. "Tell my boy I'm proud of him." Billy was devastated by his father's death, but he was also at peace in a way he had never been before. The last conversation he'd had with his father wasn't about disappointment or failure. It was about the film DiMaggio had shown, about how proud the Babe was of Billy's progress. "He saw me play," Billy told DiMaggio at the funeral. "For the first time in my life he saw me play and he was proud." DiMaggio put his arm around the boy's shoulders. "He was always proud of you, Billy. He just wanted you to be happy." After his father's death, Billy's baseball career took off. He made his high school varsity team and quickly became one of their best players. College scouts began showing interest. For the first time, people were talking about Billy Ruth's potential, not his father's legacy. But Billy never forgot the man who had made it all possible. Years later, when Billy was playing semi-professional baseball in the minor leagues, a reporter asked him about his famous father. "Babe Ruth was a great baseball player," Billy said. "But Joe DiMaggio was the man who taught me how to be myself." The reporter pressed for more details about growing up as Babe Ruth's son. "Look," Billy said. "My father was a legend. That's a heavy thing for a kid to carry. I spent years trying to be him and failing. It nearly destroyed my love for the game." "What changed?" the reporter asked. Billy smiled. "Joe DiMaggio taught me that I didn't have to be Babe Ruth. I just had to be the best Billy Ruth I could be. That made all the difference." Billy Ruth never made it to the major leagues. He played semi-pro ball for several years before becoming a high school baseball coach. But his real legacy wasn't in his playing career. It was in the hundreds of young players he mentored over the decades. Billy had learned from DiMaggio that coaching wasn't about creating copies of great players. It was about helping each player discover their own potential. He passed that lesson on to every kid he coached. DiMaggio and Billy remained close friends for the rest of DiMaggio's life. Every year on the anniversary of Babe Ruth's death, they would meet at the old practice field behind Yankee Stadium. They would take a few swings, talk about baseball, and remember the man whose dying wish had brought them together. In 1999, when Joe DiMaggio passed away, Billy was one of the pallbearers at his funeral. In his eulogy, he said something that surprised many people who knew their story. "Everyone knows Joe DiMaggio as one of the greatest baseball players who ever lived," Billy said. "But I knew him as something even more important. I knew him as the man who taught me that being yourself is enough, that trying your best is enough. That love for the game matters more than any record or statistic." Billy paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Joe DiMaggio saved my relationship with baseball. But more than that, he saved my relationship with my father. He showed me that Babe Ruth wasn't just a legend. He was also a dad who loved his son and wanted him to be happy. The last thing my father ever said to me was that he was proud. I have that memory because Joe DiMaggio made sure it happened. That's the kind of man he was. That's the kind of legacy that really matters. After the funeral, Billy returned to the old practice field one more time. He brought his own son, a 10-year-old boy who was just starting to show interest in baseball. Grandpa DiMaggio used to practice here, Billy told his son, using the nickname his family had given to Joe DiMaggio. Was he really that good? The boy asked. Billy smiled, remembering a scared 16-year-old who could barely hold a bat. He was better than good, son. He was patient. He was kind. He believed in people when they couldn't believe in themselves. Billy handed his son a bat the right size, the right weight for a 10-year-old boy. Want to take a few swings? Billy asked. His son nodded eagerly. Remember, Billy said, echoing the words that had changed his life so many years ago, baseball is supposed to be fun. The moment it stops being fun, you're doing it wrong. As his son took his first practice swings on the same field where Joe DiMaggio had taught Billy to love baseball again, Billy could almost hear DiMaggio's voice on the wind. Find your own game. Be yourself. That's enough. The mentorship that began with a promise to a dying father had become a legacy that would last for generations. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't skill or knowledge. Sometimes it's permission to be themselves. That's what Joe DiMaggio gave Billy Ruth, and that's what Billy Ruth passed on to every young player he ever coached. The understanding that baseball, like life, isn't about living up to someone else's expectations. It's about finding your own way to play the game you love. The broken family that Babe Ruth had worried about on his deathbed was healed not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through daily acts of patience, encouragement, and faith. Joe DiMaggio had kept his promise to a dying friend, and in doing so he had created something even more valuable than any baseball record, a tradition of mentorship that would touch countless lives. That's the real story of Joe DiMaggio and Babe Ruth's son, not just a story about baseball, but a story about healing, hope, and the power of believing in someone when they can't believe in themselves.